Hello, welcome to the rice insect update for the virtual extension meetings heading into the 2021 rice growing season. I'm Blake Wilson. I'm an extension entomologist with the LSU AgCenter with the responsibilities for sugarcane and rice pest management. In rice, one of the things that determines what kind of year it's going to be in terms of pest pressure is planting date. Prior studies have showed that early planting is one way to avoid the most damaging rice water weevil infestations. However, we looked at this over the past 3 years and didn't see any significant effect of planting date. Weevil infestations were very high across the board, even at our earlier planting dates. If you look at the left side of the screen, those are our weevil numbers on the y-axis. 30 larvae per core would be a highly damaging infestation. And so we're going to need to have an aggressive management strategy in place for rice water weevil regardless of planting date. We saw the opposite in terms of stem borers. These are whitehead densities or blanked panicles caused by stem borer larvae. At our earlier planting dates in March, we saw very low level infestations, just about 1 whitehead per meter squared. And we think that for each one of these whiteheads, you're losing just over 1% yield. And so at those earlier planting dates, losses are going to be fairly minimal, and we're not going to need a management strategy there. However, once we get into later planted rice, we can see potential for much greater losses, approaching 10% from stem borers. And in late planted rice, particularly in the southwestern part of the state, those densities aren't uncommon. Also in later planted rice, you run the risk of having greater problems with some of our more sporadic pests. These are pests that aren't damaging in our yield in terms of yield loss in most cases, but in real late planted fields, particularly following crawfish, severe infestations can become damaging. I got some calls last year on things like bill bugs and seedling rice. South American rice miner is another one, or army worms, and also chinch bugs would fit into this category. So that late planted rice is certainly susceptible to greater risk to a greater number of pests. When we're developing rice pest management strategies, our number one pest we're targeting is the rice water weevil, and insecticidal seed treatments have become the foundation of management strategies for this pest. Based on weevil numbers throughout the state, we think the use of at least one insecticidal seed treatment is justified on just about every acre. That's particularly true in the southwestern portion of the state where weevil densities are consistently high year after year. We have a number of options available in terms of insecticidal seed treatments. Cruiser Max and Nipsit are neonicotinoid seed treatments. When used alone, these products really aren't providing a high level of control, and you can still suffer yield damaging infestations. Similarly, using them together doesn't really increase that activity at all. Dermacore is our most effective product we have available on the market. It provides good control of rice water weevil as well as stem borers. And there's been some interest in using Dermacore in combination with one of the neonicotinoids. And while we don't see an increase in weevil control using those two products in combination, we do see an increase in the spectrum of pests controlled. In most cases, this is not going to really result in an economic benefit. However, a couple of areas where I think it may be beneficial to use these two products is in some of those late planted fields where you run the risk of encountering some of these more sporadic pests, or also in hybrid rice where the addition of Cruiser or Nipsit is minimal in terms of input costs due to a much lower seeding rate. A newer product that's available on the market is Fortenza. We've tested this product quite a bit. When it's used together with Cruiser, you get the same level of control in terms of weevil control that you get with Dermacore. However, it doesn't have the stem borer activity, but as I showed earlier in some of our early planted fields, I don't think stem borers are going to be a major issue. And so this combination, I think, offers a good alternative to Dermacore and can help take some of the selection pressure off Dermacore and reduce the risk of developing insecticide resistance. One of the new problems we're facing in the rice industry is invasive apple snails. I get more calls on apple snails than any other pest in the past couple of years, and so you may have heard me talk about these creatures before. They're very large snails, much larger than any of our native snails, about the size of your fist or the size of an apple, and they lay bright pink egg masses on any structures sticking out of the water that are very easy to notice. This is a relatively new problem, and it's currently on just a limited number of acres. The snails are widespread in many of our natural bodies of water and natural ecosystems. However, their movement into rice and crawfish ponds has been a relatively new occurrence. We know that one of the main ways these snails are being introduced is through irrigation from surface waters, particularly the Mermentau and Vermilion rivers, we know are thoroughly infested throughout those river systems. And so in those areas, we're recommending use of well water to irrigate whenever possible. Another potential way these can be introduced onto new farms is through infested sacks of source crawfish. These snails do get into crawfish traps, and if you're not sure where, if your source crawfish are coming from an infested area, you may unintentionally dump snails directly into your rice fields. Also, the snails frequently lay eggs all over any surfaces that are sticking or in contact with the water, including boats or other farm equipment. So if you know your farm's infested, take care to wash that equipment and be careful moving it between fields. Expansion of these snails is something the AgCenter is carefully monitoring. And so if you find a new infestation where you didn't previously have apple snails, that's information that we're trying to track. So please let your extension agents know. We know we had some spread that occurred this year as a result of some flooding events related to the hurricanes. Luckily, with Hurricane Laura, that was more of a wind damaging storm, and so we didn't have widespread flooding and widespread expansion of apple snails. So why are we so concerned with apple snails? Well, apple snails can be a very damaging pest of rice and are damaging in many parts of the globe. Here in Louisiana, impact to rice production has been relatively minimal, in large part due to the widespread use of drill seeding, allowing the rice to get beyond that seedling stage before the flood is put on and apple snails can move into those fields. However, last year we did see the first instance of snails damaging rice. This was a really heavy infestation that was present in a water-seeded field where the seed was flown on to a field that was very heavily infested with snails, and almost entirely all the germinating seed was devoured, and this field had to be replanted. So there are concerns that apple snails do have potential to negatively impact rice production. The bigger problem we're seeing, however, is related to crawfish. In areas where these snails are prevalent, crawfish farmers have a really tough time managing them. In some cases, the infestations have become so severe they've had to drain the ponds and stop crawfishing early in the season. They clog traps and compete for forage. Additionally, some of these instances, they're catching more snails than crawfish, really slowing down the operations to the point where they're no longer profitable. So it looks like this is going to be a severe problem moving forward, and we want to take steps to limit the amount of crawfish acres that are infested with these apple snails. We're exploring potential chemical control solutions that crawfish producers can apply to these fields, and we know copper sulfate is effective at killing snails. However, we're trying to find some strategies that don't pose a risk to the crawfish in those fields. Copper sulfate can be toxic to crawfish as well, so we're hoping to identify some strategies that will work that are also safe. But that research is currently ongoing. Another invasive pest we're monitoring for is the rice delphacid. This is a small brown plant hopper that's a very damaging pest in Central America. We don't think it occurs here in Louisiana yet. However, they have seen some damaging infestations in Texas in recent years, particularly in ratoon rice late in the season. And so we're monitoring this carefully to see if it shows up in Louisiana. That's definitely information we'd like to have. If you think you have this pest this year, please contact us and let us know. I'd like to thank the Rice Research Board for their support, as well as our staff and crew at the Rice Station. And I've put my contact information here. I'm always available if you have questions or comments. Also encourage you to see the Rice Varieties and Management Tips publication for more information on all of these pests as well as others, and a guide for selecting insecticidal seed treatments. Thank you.